So the Nikon Zf is arguably one of the best mirrorless cameras in the Z lineup. Nikon have really finessed that balance between the aesthetics, the performance and the price. With all the videos giving all the great reasons why you should get a ZF, I thought after a chat with a fellow photographer I'd give my logic for me not getting one, despite my fear of missing out. This is going to be a relatively short video, and in it I'm going to go through briefly my use cases, how a ZF might fit in, what it might give me, where it might not quite fit, and then on balance why I've chosen not to get a ZF at this point in time. So let's start with my personal use cases. As you know, I'm a hybrid shooter. I shoot photography and video with my Z6 and Z8. From a photography perspective, it tends to be travel, city type photography, and I find the Z8, Z6 combination gives me the level of versatility I need. I tend to shoot RAW or RAW plus JPEG, and that versatility comes from, in the Z8, the 45 megapixel sensor, which allows me to crop in and marrying the cameras up with my 24-70 f2.8 lens, which is an absolutely stunning lens. For video, a lot of what I do is talking heads, so studio based, quite short pieces that get inserted into other material. And what I found recently is actually with the Z8, shooting in 8K gives me versatility in post-production. I tend to shoot H.265 10-bit in camera with my Z8, and when I'm out on the road, if I'm doing some travel or outdoor video, I tend to shoot in 4K, which allows me to use the Z6 if I want a slightly lighter kit. And again, I'll shoot either H.265 or H.264 in camera. So that hybrid use case really works well with the Nikon Z series cameras. So how would a ZF fit into my kit bag? Well, as you know, when I got my Z8, I traded in my Z7. Over time, I'd rationalized my kit bag and I had traded in my Sony and my Fuji kit and really rationalized down onto that Nikon Z series. So now I have my Z8 and my Z6. My Z6 I really use for video B-roll when I need something slightly smaller or lighter, and as a backup camera. It's still a very capable camera even after 5 years in the market. What I've worked out is actually I don't need more bodies, and therefore a ZF would actually replace my Z6. So what would the ZF give me? Well, let's start with aesthetics. You know, I like the retro look. I had a Fuji X-T20, which really was an earlier equivalent to the ZF-C. It was compact. I liked the retro, the dials. I liked the look. Quite often I found by using the dials, it was sometimes easier to see the settings. It also slowed you down a bit, just getting those settings right, which really helped in certain situations. And sometimes I found it was easier to use, particularly when you use touch to do the settings. There were some other little things I liked, like the threaded shutter release button, which allows you to put in a remote shutter release, a mechanical one, so giving you simplicity and lightness in your kit bag. From a performance perspective, there's not much I can say in addition to all the other videos out there on this. The ZF is a truly capable camera with its XP7 processor at its core. Equally, using the EN-EL15C battery gives commonality, and it's a good balance of battery for size versus performance. From a video perspective, the ZF having H.265 10-bit in-camera capability because of that XP7 processor is a real benefit. The other thing that I see as a real positive is the vibration reduction, which is, you know, Z series leading at an 8-stop performance level. Equally, the autofocus in low light compared to my Z6 is streets ahead at -10 EV versus -3.5 EV in my Z6. Whilst I don't often need it, when I do, it's really helpful, and therefore that difference would be a benefit. The other thing I quite like, and I know it's a little bit controversial with some people, is the LCD screen that totally flips round. I quite often use a monitor so I can see what's going on if I'm videoing myself, and therefore having that built into the camera would be really useful. Equally, when you flip it round so the monitor is facing the back of the camera, it provides protection for the LCD, which is really useful as well. When we look at price, in absolute terms, the sort of dollar for functionality ratio is really attractive with the ZF, and it makes it a really attractive price point for the level of functionality you get. And therefore, when I stack up the aesthetics, the performance and the price, it really does stack up to give me that fear of missing out. The flip side, and these are personal slight concerns I had with the ZF and how it would fit into my kit bag. If we start with the aesthetics again, the only really small issue I have with the aesthetics is the material on the EVF prism. Where you've got contrasting colours, I'm not so sure about the look there. I would have preferred it to be black at that point, and then the colours on the body are pretty good to me. I quite like the colours. From a performance perspective, if we start with video, then the 24.5 megapixel sensor does limit the ZF to 4K. That's probably in combination with the memory cards as well, which we'll come on to. Now, whilst that isn't a big issue for me, my Z6 obviously is limited to 4K. I did say that I'm finding 8K really useful, and therefore having a backup camera that would be 8K capable would be a real benefit. The other thing, as I said, that perhaps limits the ZF in terms of video performance is the memory cards. It's great to have dual memory cards in the ZF, but the size of those cards and the type of those cards is a slight issue for me. Obviously with a Z8 I'm using Compact Flash Express and an SD card. In my Z6 I can use a Compact Flash Express type B card. The ZF obviously having the SD and micro SD cards is a slight issue because I'd have to carry another type of card and it's not got all of that compatibility. Again, not a big issue, it's one that I could overcome. And obviously if you had to trade off having a Compact Flash Express cards in the camera but a smaller battery, that wouldn't have been such a good trade-off in my view. The bigger issue for me is the user interface. My Z8 obviously has memory banks, my Z6 has user settings, which allows me to set up different settings and quickly move between them. There's also a lot of similarity between the buttons, which makes it easy to jump between the two cameras. The ZF, because of its more retro styling, is a more set as you shoot type of camera, and therefore as a hybrid shooter where I'm jumping perhaps between camera bodies, between stills and video, between different types of shooting style, having those memory banks and user settings is a real positive for me. Equally, the ZF does have some other functionality that is nice to have for some people. The pixel shift is going to be a real benefit to give you those real high definition images. However, for me, most of my images have moving things in them in some place, and therefore pixel shift would only be something that I used on occasion. So if we now come to price, then for me, it's about the cost of switching. As I said, I don't need another camera body, and therefore for me, I would probably trade my Z6 to take in a ZF. And with the cost of switch, it's not just the cost of the camera or the net cost when you trade in the Z6. There are other things that soon add up, whether it's the cables, the need for micro HDMI versus a full HDMI in my Z8, a new L bracket. I'd probably have to switch my FTZ adapter to the FTZ Mark II adapter because of the size of the ZF. The base plate on the original FTZ would probably protrude lower than the base of the camera and you wouldn't be able to set it down as easily. So when you take all of that into account, it does make the economics slightly less attractive. So hopefully that's given you a quick insight into the two sides of my personal equation of whether I should trade in and trade up to a ZF. And for me, it feels like it's just not quite there today. Don't get me wrong, it would be a nice to have, but it's just not compelling. Who knows though, if and when we get a Z6 Mark III, it may be more video centric in terms of the functionality it comes with. Maybe it will be 8K, so it would need a minimum of a 35 megapixel sensor. Perhaps it would come with a 45 megapixel sensor to give electronic zoom, electronic VR. And having a CF Express card will provide that compatibility with my Z8. Maybe it'll even come with memory banks to give even more commonality in terms of the user interface. So this video has been hopefully a quick canter through my personal use case and the decision that I've gone through. Have you found the ZF a compelling must get? If so, how are you getting on with it? It'd be great to know in the comments below. And as always, I look forward to seeing you on a future video.